So this semester I am taking Intro to Physical Geography, and one of the main projects for that class is to take a field trip out into nature to observe how some of the concepts and processes that we've been studying in class look outside the pages of our textbook. The assignment is to write a report about our field outing, but I thought that sounded kind of boring. Wouldn't it be more fun to tell the story of my trip into the wild outdoors visually? After all, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So for my excursion, what I'm going to do is to go hiking in the Tongue River Canyon, which is located at the base of the Bighorn Mountains just west of Dayton, Wyoming, about a 25 or 30-minute drive away from my home in Sheridan. What I'm going to do is park at the bottom of the canyon and then hike up as far as the Tongue River Cave, about a 3-mile hike total. The first step is obviously to prepare for my hike. This is October in Wyoming, which means a couple of things. One, the weather is pretty nice. I think I can just wear a t-shirt. However, October also means hunting season, and there are lots of crazy rednecks running around who just might think that I look like a deer or an elk or something. Therefore, I'm wearing a bright orange hunting vest over my t-shirt. Safety first. Finally, I'll want to wear my trusty hiking boots. Anytime you leave the pavement, there's a chance of meeting snakes or mud pits or other yucky stuff that you might not want to step on or in with tennis shoes. So, we're ready to go. Welcome to the Tongue River Canyon. This is what the landscape looks like around you as you stand in the parking lot at the bottom of the canyon. The first physical geography concept that you immediately notice is the limestone bluffs. Once upon a time, a long time ago, the Bighorn Mountains didn't exist, and this was all one big inland sea where dinosaurs frolicked and sea creatures lived their little sea creature lives in peace. Until they died. And when they died, their bodies all piled up at the bottom of the sea and were eventually turned into rocks by the pressure of all the layers of sediment and stuff that piled on top of them over the course of millions of years. This became the Madison Limestone Formation. Time moved on, tectonic plates also moved, and the collision of those plates caused the inland sea to disappear and the landscape to be uplifted into mountains. Now, instead of being underwater, all of that limestone was on top where it could be exposed to physical weathering processes. One of those weathering processes can be heard behind me right now. As the landscape uplifted in the mountains, the Tongue River carved through all those layers of limestone, forming the canyon that we see today. As you can see, the Tongue River at this point has a pretty steep gradient. From its headwaters at the top of the Bighorns to the bottom of the canyon, the river is running downhill at a pretty high velocity due to the angle of the slope down which it is moving. This high velocity means that it has a lot of energy and ability to carve through the rocks. Because limestone is a softer rock anyway, the river has carved down quite a ways to the local base level of granite that lies underneath the 1,000-foot layer of limestone and sedimentary rock that makes up the walls of the canyon. As you can see, the rocks along the river at base level look a little different from the limestone walls of the canyon. They're darker colored rather than white or gray or tan, an indication of their igneous or metamorphic origin, unlike the sedimentary limestone higher up on the bluffs. What do you do when you come to a fork in the road? As the great philosopher Yogi Berra would say, you take it. If I stay on this side of the river, I can keep hiking up the canyon to the top of the Bighorns. If I cross the bridge, it's a short hike up the hill to the Tongue River Cave. I decided that for this hike I wanted to check out the cave. As you can see, we've moved up quite a ways from the level of the river and are now about halfway up the bluffs. This is right in the middle of the limestone layer that forms the walls of the canyon. As with most caves, the Tongue River Cave eroded over time into that limestone. There are 2 river channels inside this 1.5-mile deep cave, one of which is active and one of which is dry. Between the river channel inside the cave and the groundwater that seeps in through the roof, the cave is still evolving and deepening today. However, we're going to have to take that on faith because we won't be able to enter the cave today. It's already closed for the season. As you can see, the gate is shut. When I was little, I thought that this gate, strong steel bars, had to be there to either keep the bears out or, and maybe this was more scary, to keep the bears in. Either way, I definitely don't want to linger. It turns out, however, that the gate doesn't really have anything to do with bears, who probably don't want to have anything to do with this cave anyway. Too many people. Turns out that bears aren't the only animals that like to hibernate in caves. Bats do too. So, the Forest Service closes the cave for the winter every year so that the bats can sleep undisturbed. Unless a bear is unlucky enough to be hanging out in the cave when they shut the gate on October 15th, there won't be any of them locked inside the cage. I'm not quite as concerned about waking up the bats as I used to be about waking up the bears, but we'll let them sleep in peace anyway. It's time to start the hike back down from the cave. As you can see, my hike is not over just because I've finished checking out the cave. It's still a steep climb down the hill. I decided to take a little bit different route down from the cave than the one that I took on the way up. The path to the cave mostly runs through the pine trees, which is nice, but I wanted to get one more good look at the river from above. Looking down on the bridge, you can really get a feel for how effective the Tongue River has been at carving its way down through the limestone over the years. Remember, this is less than halfway up the side of the canyon, and we're still quite a ways up. Here we are, back at the bridge. From this angle, the gradient of the river doesn't look that steep. We're near the bottom of the canyon and the river is starting to level out as it enters the foothills and the plateau at the bottom of the Bighorn Mountains. We're still in the canyon and the water's moving pretty quickly, but once it leaves the canyon, the Tongue River follows a pretty level path for the rest of its route before it meets up with the Yellowstone River in southern Montana. From this photo, taken from Riverside, you can tell that the bridge is raised a fair ways above the level of the water. Remember that we're hiking in October. If you were to take this same hike in late May or early June, when snow is melting and the runoff is high, the place where I'm standing would be underwater and the bridge would not be quite so high in the air. A short walk later, we're back at the beginning. The Tongue River Canyon is fascinating and a great place to investigate some key physical geography concepts like physical and chemical weathering, fluvial processes, and different types of rock without needing to go more than a couple miles from the parking lot. It would be great to spend some more time here, but as you can see, the Forest Service doesn't really want us camping out. The message is clear. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. And so, carrying nothing with me but memories, pictures, videos, and a little chunk of limestone that I couldn't resist picking up from outside the cave, I drive back out of the canyon. One last look back at the entrance into the canyon. I stopped because I saw an apple tree along the road, and the apples looked too good not to grab a couple for my lunch. One more souvenir from my trip. We're only a few miles out of the canyon, but you can see that the Tongue River has already slowed down, widened out, and assumed the appearance that it's going to have for the rest of its journey north and east, carving a somewhat less majestic valley through the plains of northern Wyoming and southern Montana until it meets up with the Yellowstone. Thank you for joining me and learning about the physical geography of the Tongue River Canyon. I hope that you have enjoyed the hike.